Alright, what's going on, boys? I'm going to be bringing you a video that's explaining the weapons here, giving you a quick little insight and guide to them. I'm explaining how they work in groups, solo scenarios, PvE, and PvP. Just giving you a general insight on the weapons, if you're looking to do that, along with some weapon combos. Without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's go over the Ice Gauntlet now. What the Ice Gauntlet really excels at is Area of Denial. This thing is a monster when it comes to that. You have Ice Shower here and Ice Storm, both creating areas of denial to allow you to kite in and out of. You get movement speed when you go in and out of these, and you also just slow your opponent down. When anybody walks in Ice Shell, they actually become rooted for a whole second, and it's very easy to combo that with this nice passive Heavy Freeze. Whenever you heavy attack a target who's in either Ice Storm or Ice Shower here, they get rooted in place for one whole second. So if they get caught by one heavy, they're just going to get caught by multiple heavies, and it's going to basically rooted in place until the ability ends. This is very good at locking down players and mobs and preventing them from going anywhere, really slowing down the pace of the fight. That's what this Ice Gauntlet excels at. In terms of this is good in PvE groups, PvP groups, and wars. This thing is amazing, and it's also really good in 1vx and solo PvP play. And in terms of dueling, this thing is probably the best dueling weapon in the game because you got this nice passive here called Entombed. So what Entombed does is you basically have invulnerable for 10 whole seconds, and you can get out of it using the left mouse button, causing a damage and knockback for 20 mana. This thing will do a bunch of damage the longer you're in it, so it's very hard for people to break out of it if you're in like a duel. And you can break out of this and do a bunch of AoE damage to mobs around you as well. These are also great for sustaining yourselves while in that PvP/PvE environment. Thing really excels in that, and this thing is a great weapon to pair with the life staff, since you will never have mana sustains while running the life staff. If you're looking for something to run with the life staff, this is probably the best weapon for you, definitely for PvE and for PvP, because you can just deny, have a bunch of area denial and stall with Entombed from people getting on you. This weapon is definitely good at that. Overall, this is a medium to high skill cap weapon, since you have stuff where you can roll in and Ice Shower a bunch of mobs or people, basically rooting them in place and allowing your teammates to follow with relative ease. If you're looking for a weapon that has a lot of area denial and a lot of zone control, then the Ice Gauntlet is probably the one for you. Great. So for the Rapier, what stands out to me is that it's a very high skill cap weapon, very rewarding. It has pretty good PvE DPS, and it has a lot of outplay potential. It has good mobility, and it's good playing as a very good solo weapon to use. So for example here, if you want to use DPS, you have Tondo and Flurry. Those are some nice DPS abilities. For Flourish and Finishers, also another one if you're looking for one. And they have Invade here. Invade's actually really strong just because it's like a mini roll. You can dodge opponents and you can dodge NPCs. Really going to that like outplay potential here. Using your skill and knowing the timings and punishing people for making mistakes. The Rapier does that really well. And Riposte here, you basically just parry an enemy's attack or a player's attack. So this is good once again if you can predict your opponent's movements and enemy's abilities. And Flèche here is a nice execute dash, since you can hit twice with it with interruption. And in terms of the Rapier, it takes a while to scale up, like a level 11 or 12. That's when the Rapier starts really coming online. Since you get momentum here, this is a very strong passive to have. Overall, since you gain 25% increased damage on your light and heavy attacks after performing an ability. That's very useful to have. In terms of war and group PvP, this isn't the best weapon. I would recommend going with other choices. But when you're playing solo, this is one of the best weapons to run. This thing is phenomenal. It has so much outplay potential. And it's good at 1vxing, PvE solo. It's good at all that stuff. And it's also just good on styling on your opponent. So if you're looking for that, then the Rapier might be the choice for you. Let's go over the Musket now. So what's the Musket really good at? It's really good at wars. This thing is an absolute beast in a war. It's a must-have if you're doing a war because of just the shooter stance here, allowing you to just basically shoot 5 shots without exiting the stance without ever having to reload. Sniper here, allowing you to zoom in on the people on siege engine. This thing is a monster at taking people out. And if you want to be that cheeky sniper hiding in bushes, this is also the weapon for you, since while you're crouched, your name tag actually won't show up, making you harder to see and harder to hit. In terms of PvE, this thing is pretty good at single target DPS with PvE, since you got something like Shooter Stance here and Powder Burn, really stacking up on the dot. And you got power shot here doing a bunch of damage when you load that baby up. This weapon also rewards heavily on headshots here, as you can see with these passives. It really rewards like that higher skill cap variant, since you got to hit your headshots to really get the full value out of this thing. In terms of the Trapper, I don't think stopping power is a very good ability, and the sticky bomb's kind of been underwhelming, but you can combo sticky bomb with a trap if you want to be more of a trapper. Traps are actually very strong on the musket because it allows you to not only do 20% more damage, but you can also heal 100% of the damage done to the target on the trap, so you can life steal all your health back with like one headshot from per se a powder shot here. It's very good at that. Very good at also keeping yourself safe in a war, since people are going to have to walk past your traps to get to you. So you can just keep that all in mind. So in terms of group and war, this thing is very strong. In PvE, this thing is also very strong in like a dungeon, so you have the high single target DPS. In terms of solo, in both PvP and PvE, I don't think it's very good in terms of those regards, since it doesn't really excel. And so you kind of need someone in front of you to really use the full value of the musket. In terms of what this thing skills off Dex and Intelligence, you can definitely combo this thing with the Rapier. It's a very strong combo with the Rapier. It's one of the best weapons to pair this thing with. Or you can even combo this thing with the Spear if you want to go for like that range melee Dex DPS setup. Alright, if that sounds like what you want to do, then the musket can be the weapon for you. A quick side note is this weapon does take a little bit of time also to scale up, since you need the passive and abilities to do everything properly. And this weapon will definitely benefit a lot more and more as you level this bad boy up. Alright, I'm going to go over the bow now. The bow really stands out in very high single target DPS. It's very good, so you got something like penetrating shot does 150% weapon damage. And you can stack that with like long range and then evasive tactics. So you get a lot of high damage stacking. The bow really rewards a lot of high stacking damage, since it's got a lot of passives to enable you to do that. It also rewards headshots. It's like passive concussion. And it's also got a very high skill cap, probably second only to the Rapier. Since if you land, like, for example, Rapid Shot here, you land all your 3 arrows, not only are you doing all that extra damage, but you're also reducing this ability by 50%, and you're also doing an extra 25% damage on the 3rd shot if you're able to land that one as well. Weapon here just really rewards you landing all your shots, hitting your headshots, and just being consistent. And then for your AoEs, you got Poison Shot and Rain of Arrows here. These are your 2 AoEs. This thing isn't the best for AoEs in war. If you want to do something like that, I recommend the Fire Staff. But once again, Poison Shot has another high skill cap ability. With a direct hit, you deal 200% more damage. So it's really rewarding you landing your shots properly. This thing also has great mobility. With Evade Shot, you get to leap backwards and get some haste with it, and you get to knock back your opponent. So it allows you to create that distance very well. This is a very good Dex weapon. A lot of people like to combo this with either the Spear and Rapier. Those are some good combination with this bad boy. In terms of if you want to do AoE, I recommend the Fire Staff. In terms of war, the thing does get outshined sadly by the musket in terms of just power in the war. But this thing definitely does really well in duels. It does really well in solo 1vx and solo scenarios, since you have a lot of mobility, a lot of kiting, you know, like that rogue style-esque, and it rewards you landing on your shots. It's very good at that. And it's also pretty good in a group, since you're not needing the musket to shoot people off the siege weapons like you do in a war. In terms of PvE, this thing definitely can pull some pretty good single target DPS, since you have something like Rapid Shot here, so you can land these a lot more easily on something like a boss that's very big than like a player or a small ad. So if you want to do something like that, this is excels in those types of situations very well. And it also does benefit by getting decently higher passives, since you need to like start, you know, getting your late rapid shots here, getting your evading shot maxed out, getting stuff like evasive tactics. So this is definitely a weapon that benefits off having higher levels quite a bit. So it's definitely more of a mid game, late game type of weapon. Alright, what's going on, guys? I'm gonna go over the Warhammer now. When I think about the Warhammer, the first thing that comes to mind is the amount of CC this thing can pull off, and how essential this thing is in groups and wars for that insane CC combo. So for the CC combo, you're going to use Shockwave, Clear Out, and Path to Destiny. All the stuff provides you with a ton of CC. You got an AoE CC here, a knockback CC, and this is like a range stagger ability. Plus on top of that, you can get Aftershock here whenever a target's affected by crowd control. they're slowed by 20% for 4 seconds. So you really are just the guy there, just, you know, keeping people down on the ground and not letting them get up, and just controlling the fight through that sense. In terms of weapons that this thing will go well with, is definitely the Greataxe for group PvP and PvE, since the Greataxe and Warhammer both scale off strength, and they both have good damage and AoE abilities. In terms of how well this thing does solo, it's not the best thing solo, but it definitely can do it, because it has definitely good passives like Power Through Pain. For 1 second after taking damage, deal 35% extra damage. Really strong passive right there. Hammer Time, gain empowerment on your heavy attacks, increasing attack damage by 20% for 4 seconds. Another really strong passive there. And you got Concussive Impact, 50% of the damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs, doing a bunch of damage just by, you know, people who are affected by the Warhammer debuffs. And a good solo ability if you want to run it is Armor Breaker here. It's a powerful swing that penetrates 35% of the target's armor and deals 140% weapon damage. And with Lasting Trauma, it rends them, reducing their damage absorption by 15% for 10 seconds. You know, so just with these two passes alone, you're doing 30% extra damage. Combine this with Power Through Pain and Hammer Time, you can just you ramp up your damage numbers very easily and doing a bunch of extra damage. So this thing definitely has potential in solo, but it definitely gets outshined by other weapons. In terms of the skill, this is definitely a medium skill weapon, since you're basically just there to land your CCs and keep them, you know, down on the ground. And once you hit your first one, it's very easy to follow up with the rest. In terms of how well this thing is early game, it's very strong early game, since you can get all your CCs relatively early, and that's really the strength of the Warhammer. If you're looking for a weapon that can CC people down, then the Warhammer is probably the right weapon for you. Alright, let's go over the Hatchet now. So what does the Hatchet excel in? It excels in being a really strong early game weapon for PvE and PvP. In terms of uniqueness, it has Berserk, which allows you to not die, and it has Infected Throw, reduces healing by 30%. There's nothing else in the game that does this or prevents you from dying from an ability. So those are 2 unique things about this that stand out to me that are useful. In terms of strengths, I would say it's a pretty good PvP weapon. It's good with the Greataxe, like the best weapon to pair with the Greataxe if you want to do solo PvP. In terms of wars or groups, I don't think it's very good. Definitely weapons that outshine this one. But in terms of solo, it's pretty good, since you got healing with Berserker Refresh, and Berserker just gives you more attack damage. But this is kind of just a jack of all trades, master of none type of weapon. And it's just the main purpose I would see in using this is just to use this early game until you can switch this out for a better weapon in the mid game. But, you know, overall, this is just a Berserker type weapon. You pair this with heavy armor and you just go in for auto trades. But yeah, this weapon doesn't really excel anything, so just keep that in mind. If you're looking for the best PvE DPS or the best PvP weapon, this isn't the one for you. But this is the best one to pair with the Greataxe, though, for PvP at the moment, for solo PvP. Alright, so I'm just going to go over the Warhammer now. What does the Warhammer excel in? Alright, so I'm going to go over the Greataxe now. What does the Greataxe excel in? Pretty much everything. This weapon's, in my opinion, the best weapon in the game. It's really good early game. It's really good mid game. It's really good late game. It's got really no weaknesses. For example, you got mobility. You got AoE. You got a chain that pulls people in. You got really good damage. This weapon really lacks nothing in the game right now. And it's good at all stages. It has really no weaknesses overall. The only thing I think is bad about this weapon is it doesn't have good PvE DPS. That's pretty much it. It gets outshined by a weapon like the Rapier and the Spear for DPS and PvE. But that's about it. So for example, here you got the Reap, which allows you to pull people towards you. It goes up to 8 meters. Your Charge, great movement ability in the game. You just zoom around the map with this bad boy. You got Bloodlust. You move 30% faster and deal 15% more damage when looking at a foe within 15 meters. This is insane. I don't think there's any passive in the game right now that allows you to go 30% faster just by looking at a man. So you just easily can run people down, easily root them in. Or you can use Gravity Well here, which is a great CC ability as well, since you basically just throw down a vortex and just sucks people to the center of it. And not only that, but when you stand in it or any of your teammates, you gain 10% fortify. So basically you reduce damage by 10%. And it's just very strong, since you can run people down and keep them locked down with the Greataxe. And it's very hard for people to get away from you, since you run 30% faster than they do just by looking at them. So it's a very good weapon at locking people down and just going in for the kill. And you also have pretty good AoE for PvE with Maelstrom and Whirlwind. These aren't very good PvP AoEs, but for PvE they get the job done. And in terms of wars, this is a great war weapon since you can lock people down with Gravity Well and give your teammates 10% damage reduction. Plus you have, whenever you pull someone in with Reap, you do a spinning attack, so you have more AoE there. In terms of group play, this is a great group play weapon, and it's a great solo play weapon. It really has no weaknesses. In terms of group, if you want to run this thing in a group, I recommend pairing with the Warhammer for the best overall group build. In terms of melee, since you have two weapons that have good CC and good lockdown, and if you're running solo, I recommend the Hatchet, since it has the Hatchet has good healing and survivability. So if you're wanting to run the Greataxe, if you want to run the best weapon in the game, then this is probably the weapon for you. And you want to run the weapon that's pretty much good at everything, this is also the weapon for you. The only thing it doesn't really have is actually just range. So that's the Greataxe in a nutshell. Alright, so I'm going to go with the Fire Staff here. First thing that comes to mind with the Fire Staff is this weapon is good in pretty much everything. It's like the range Greataxe in my opinion. It really has no weaknesses. For example, it's really good in PvE for AoEing stuff down. And it's really good in wars for AoEing people down. It's good in solo because you got great mobility with Burnout. And you've got great AoE with Fireball, Meteor Shower. This is the PvE AoE. Incinerate, another PvE AoE which also heals you and can hit twice. And you got Pillar of Fire, which is both PvE and a PvP ability, since this does 40% more damage to foes at max health. So with this weapon here, it definitely excels in pretty much every situation. In terms of passives, it has also really good passive with Preform of Fire God here, increasing your crit damage by 20%. Spell Sling, allowing your abilities to crit 15% more. So it's a very high damaging weapon. It's good in duels, it's good in 1vx, it's good in group play, it's good in wars, it's good in PvE, it's good in AoEing in PvE. It's just overall just such a great weapon to run. The only weakness that I think this weapon has is pretty much actually just none. I don't think this weapon really has a weakness since it's ranged and you can kite, and it has good burst with a heavy fireball combo or a Pillar of Fire with full HP combo, stuff like that. It even has good burst. You also can take less damage from Let It Burn. You can basically just setting people on fire lets you take 10% less damage. It's really strong in its own right. So for the Fire Staff here, it's just good at pretty much everything. It has really no weaknesses. In terms of scaling, this is a weapon that I definitely think actually needs to scale. Not the best early game, but when you start getting that 11 to 12 range again, you really start seeing how strong the Fire Staff can be. And I'm just going to throw a quick side note in there for anyone who's going PvP. I don't recommend getting any of the Fireball passives here. I recommend rushing Burnout and then grabbing Fireball right after that. Alright, so I want to go over the Spear here. First thing that comes to mind with the Spear is probably the best single target DPS weapon for PvE in the game. This with the Perforate here, Skewer, and Vault Kick, since Vault Kick reduces the cooldowns of these two abilities. And you also can get cooldowns with Successful Light Attack Chain here by 10%. You can cycle through abilities relatively quickly in PvE. In terms of skill, I think this is a medium to high skill weapon here. Definitely has some potential in PvP for skill. In PvE, it's just getting your rotation down properly. That's pretty much the skill for this weapon in PvE. And in terms of, let's say, group play, this doesn't really excel in group play, nor for wars. It doesn't really excel in there either. Or for solo PvP, it doesn't really excel in there either. For solo PvE, this thing is amazing though. Like, this thing does so much damage. You just plow through enemies in solo PvE. Very strong in that regard. And in terms of dueling, this thing is definitely pretty good in duels, since you can run something like Sweep here and Javelin and maybe even Vault Kick or Skewer, depending on what you like to run. And you can definitely get some really good combo CC chains in here. You can combo this with Refreshing Reach. So what you can do, for example, in a duel is you can sweep them down, roll dodge into a Refreshing Reach here, and heavy attack them, reducing all the cooldowns by 15%. So there's just a lot of potential in duels. This thing does lack mobility though. That's why it's not good in open world by yourself in terms of PvP. But if you're don't need mobility then this thing is pretty good. That's why it's decent in duels. And this thing is just phenomenal in PvE. For those reasons, this is a great dex weapon. It also scales off strength, so if you want to have that, it also does that as well. And that's just my opinions on the spear. Wait, let's go over the sword and shield now. When I think about sword and shield, I think tank. You're kind of like a tank god. You have defensive formation, for example. Whenever you block all your allies within 2 meters, take 30% reduced damage. This is great for, like, you say you're fighting a boss and you block. You basically reduce your teammates' incoming damage by 30%, you know, giving them a higher chance to survive the attack. Or if you're on a point in war, you can do the same thing. And then you have Defiant Stance here, reduce all incoming base damage from attacker by 30%. This only applies to you. This is taunt gem compatible, if you are wondering. The sword and shield also scales off strength and dex, if you're also wondering about that. You also get a really nice stun with sword and shield here. You know, it goes up to 3 seconds. You actually have time to weapon swap to another weapon with this stun and use like a Greataxe execute. That's a cheeky little combo you can run if you want to run something like that. Definitely does a lot of burst damage and can catch people off guard. In terms of AoE, you got Whirling Blade here. And in terms of a gap closer, you got Leaping Strike. Your auto attack chain with this weapon as well is also kind of an AoE. So just keep that in mind. This thing really excels in wars, PvE, tanking, and even in group play. The best weapon I can think to combo this thing with is the Life Staff. Basically, with the Life Staff, you can actually become unkillable with the sword and shield. It's really broken. Really was broken in the betas. I'm pretty sure the Life Staff will get another nerf when the game launches, because I think it's way overtuned. So, for example, if you were running sword and shield with Life Staff and heavy armor in the previous beta, you would basically need at least 3 to 4 people hitting you to die, which was pretty much insane. So if you want to become an unkillable god, then this is the weapon for you. You pair this thing with the Life Staff and you become really tanky and unkillable. Or if you just want to tank some stuff in PvP and PvE, then you can also go for this weapon. In terms of skills, this is pretty strong early game, since it doesn't require a lot of passives. And this is just another medium to low weapon, I think, to use in terms of skill cap. Using defensive formation properly and calling your teammates. So if you want to get good at something, then this is a thing you should try and master with this weapon, because having someone who can do this properly will definitely can change the tide of the battles in some situations. I want to go over the Life Staff now. The Life Staff is probably the best overall weapon in the game, just because the amount of healing this thing can put out is ridiculously overtuned. And an important note is that if you're wearing light armor, you heal for 20% more than if you're in heavy. And this thing just excels in pretty much PvE and PvP. Thing is a must-have for groups in any scenario. Since in war, you're going to be healing a lot of your allies, and you're going to be healing a lot of your allies in PvE. It's a must-have for doing dungeons and wars and group PvP. It really helps a lot. For example, you got overprotection here. You just slap it on your ally, 4 to 5. They take 10% less damage for 20 seconds. You also heal the ally, and you deal 146% weapon damage when it hits an enemy. That's, you know, just a jack of all trades, really strong ability. And then you got ability like Sacred Grounds over here, where you just slap it on the ground and you heal for 20% weapon damage every second. Cool note about this thing, it actually still is active when you switch weapons, so if you're wondering about that. If you're running PvE, I recommend pairing this bad boy with an Ice Gauntlet. If you're strictly running PvE, Ice Gauntlet is the way to go, and that is because you have an ability with the Ice Gauntlet, which is Entombed, where you can basically, you know, regen all your mana, and you have a Ice Storm for some AoE denial and all that. If you're running PvP in like war or in a group, I recommend running once again the Ice Gauntlet, or actually the Greataxe, just because what the Greataxe allows you to do is it allows you to have nice mobility, and it also gives you a CC to work with, so making you harder to kill. Since in PvP you might be the target and you're going to need that extra mobility to get out of those sticky situations. So this is an overall great weapon. I expect this thing to actually get a nerf when the game launches, or some type of tweak over the few weeks when the game's actually released, because this thing will be overtuned, so just keep that in mind. Or you can also pair this thing with a sword and shield and become unkillable. So for example, if you were running a sword and shield with Life Staff with heavy armor in the last open beta, you would need at least 4 people to kill you, which is pretty dumb in my opinion. There should be nothing like that in the game. But this is if you want to become an unkillable god, then that is one of the routes you can take. If you're wondering how hard you are to kill with light armor in this thing, you can't be killed by 1 person or even 2, I think, if you're running light armor with this thing. So if you want to run light armor, it takes at least I think 3 people to kill you, as long as you're rolling properly and using your heals. So overall, this is a great weapon if you want to heal it. It's a must-have for wars and dungeons. So if you want to be a healer, then this weapon is just overall great, since it's in a really good spot right now.